The deafening thunder of helicopter blades sliced through the morning air, rattling windows and startling birds from their perches. Marine One, the distinctive white and green presidential helicopter, descended onto the small field behind Sarah Mitchell's modest suburban home. Neighbors emerged from their houses in pajamas and robes, mouths agape as they watched the surreal scene unfold. "Ma'am, the president sends his regards," a stone-faced Secret Service agent said at Sarah's door. "You have 45 minutes to prepare. Colonel Matthews is waiting." 3 weeks earlier, Sarah had given up her first-class seat, her very first chance to experience luxury travel after 6 years of arranging it for others, to a disabled stranger with a scarred face. She never imagined that simple act of kindness would bring Marine One to her backyard. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what you think will happen next. And if you want more stories that touch the light within your heart, like this video, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. Welcome to In the Heartlight. Let's begin. Sarah Mitchell had worked at Sunshine Travel for 6 years. Her desk, positioned near the large bay window that overlooked Main Street, was adorned with travel magazines, destination brochures, and a small globe that clients' children often spun while their parents booked exotic getaways. What her desk didn't have were personal travel photographs. Unlike her colleagues whose workspaces showcased their adventures in Paris, Bali, or the Maldives, Sarah's walls were bare of such mementos. "I always recommend the overwater bungalows at the St. Regis Bora Bora," Sarah explained to a wealthy couple planning their anniversary trip. "The private butler service is exceptional, and you can watch tropical fish swim beneath your floor while enjoying breakfast." Her voice carried genuine enthusiasm, despite having never experienced any of these luxuries herself. At 32, Sarah had built a reputation as Sunshine Travel's top agent. Her client list included CEOs, lawyers, doctors, and even a few minor celebrities who valued her meticulous planning and thoughtful touches. She arranged for champagne to be waiting in rooms, birthday cakes to appear at precisely the right moment, and private tours of attractions normally closed to the public. Sarah knew how to make her clients feel special, even though her own travel experiences were limited to weekend road trips and the occasional budget flight to visit family. After the wealthy couple left with their custom-designed Tahitian itinerary, Sarah's coworker Lisa leaned against her desk. "I don't get it," Lisa said, twirling a lock of her highlighted hair. "How are you our top producer when you've barely been anywhere? I need to experience a place before I can sell it." Sarah smiled and closed her laptop. "Remember Mrs. Abernathy's Antarctica cruise last month?" Lisa nodded. "The one where you arranged for the ship's captain to announce her birthday during the crossing of the Drake Passage?" "Exactly. I've never been to Antarctica, but I spent 3 hours on the phone with that captain learning everything about the ship, the crew, and what makes the experience special." Sarah gestured to the stack of thank you cards on her desk. "I might not have the personal photos, but I have relationships with people who do have those experiences." "Doesn't it make you jealous?" Lisa asked, lowering her voice. "Planning all these amazing trips for other people while you stay behind?" Sarah paused, considering the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But there's joy in knowing I've helped create memories for others. When clients come back glowing with stories about how perfect everything was, that feels almost as good as experiencing it myself." What Sarah didn't mention was the financial reality that kept her grounded. Her father's medical bills after his stroke 5 years ago had drained her savings. Between helping her parents with expenses and paying off her own student loans, luxury travel remained firmly in the someday category of her life plan. The office was just closing when Sarah's manager, Eleanor, called everyone together. "I know we're all excited about Maurice's wedding in Sydney next month," Eleanor began, nodding toward Sarah. We wanted to do something special for our star agent who has never once used her employee travel benefits. Sarah felt her cheeks warm as her colleagues turned toward her with knowing smiles. We've pooled our airline miles, Eleanor continued, producing an envelope. Sarah, we've upgraded your economy ticket to first class for your flight to Sydney. The room erupted in applause as Sarah stood in stunned silence. First class, the very experience she described to countless clients but never experienced herself. 14 hours of luxury instead of cramped discomfort. Champagne instead of plastic cups of soda. A flat bed instead of trying to sleep upright. I don't know what to say, Sarah managed, tears forming in her eyes. Thank you all so much. Lisa hugged her. Now you can finally experience what you've been selling all these years. For the next 3 weeks, Sarah could barely contain her excitement. She researched the Boeing 787 first-class cabin layout, read reviews of the menu, and even watched YouTube videos of the experience. She planned her airport outfit carefully, professional but comfortable, and splurged on a new carry-on bag worthy of the first-class cabin. On the morning of her flight, Sarah arrived at the airport 3 hours early, too excited to wait at home any longer. She checked in at the premium counter, received her boarding pass with first class printed on it, and made her way to the exclusive lounge she had only heard about from returning clients. The lounge was everything she had imagined: quiet music, comfortable seating, and an impressive spread of food and beverages. Sarah selected a pastry and coffee, then found a seat near the window overlooking the tarmac. As she watched planes taxi and take off, she noticed a man entering the lounge. He moved with difficulty, using a cane for support. His face bore a dramatic scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw, and his right hand appeared stiff and partially immobile. As he approached the reception desk, Sarah noticed how the attendant's eyes widened slightly before adopting a professional smile. The man was directed to the seating area, where he struggled to maneuver between the chairs with his carry-on bag and cane. Sarah observed as other travelers subtly shifted away or averted their eyes. It was a reaction she had seen countless times before. People uncomfortable with visible disabilities, unsure how to act, choosing distance rather than risk awkwardness. The scene transported Sarah back 5 years to her father's rehabilitation center after his stroke. She remembered how people had treated him differently after half his face had fallen slack, how they spoke louder as if he had lost his hearing, rather than some muscle control, how they sometimes addressed questions about him to Sarah rather than to him directly. The man with the cane selected a seat across from Sarah, nodding politely as he lowered himself with obvious effort. His movements were those of someone adapting to limitations rather than someone who had lived with them all his life. Sarah smiled in return, then looked back out the window, not wanting to stare. When the boarding announcement came for their flight to Sydney, Sarah gathered her belongings, noticing the man doing the same. In the gate area, she observed him checking his boarding pass and frowning slightly. As first-class passengers were called to board, Sarah stood with her premium boarding pass, feeling a flutter of excitement. This was it, her first experience of luxury travel. She joined the short line of well-dressed passengers, noticing the man with the cane still seated in the general waiting area. Just as she was about to hand her boarding pass to the gate agent, there was a commotion behind her. The man had dropped his toiletry bag, spilling its contents across the floor. Sarah watched as people walked around the scattered items, some looking annoyed at the obstruction, others pretending not to notice. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped out of line and knelt to help gather the man's belongings. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying a slight rasp. Not many people would pause their day for a stranger. "My father has similar challenges," Sarah replied, handing him his collected items. "I know how frustrating little things can become." The man smiled, and despite the scar tissue pulling at one side of his face, his eyes conveyed genuine warmth. "I'm in 32F, he said, showing her his boarding pass. "Middle seat, economy. 14 hours is going to be challenging." Sarah glanced down at the boarding pass, then at her own first-class ticket. A middle seat in economy would be difficult for anyone, but for someone with mobility issues, it would be extremely uncomfortable, possibly even painful. She thought about the lie-flat bed waiting for her in first class, the meal service on proper china, the amenity kit, and the attentive service she had been looking forward to for weeks. She also thought about her father, about the kindnesses strangers had sometimes shown him, and about how those small acts had meant everything during his recovery. "Excuse me," Sarah said, returning to the gate agent. "I'd like to switch seats with this gentleman." The agent looked confused. "You want to give up your first-class seat?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. "He needs it more than I do." The man with the cane shook his head. "I couldn't possibly accept that. First-class tickets cost thousands of dollars. It was a gift from my coworkers," Sarah explained, "but I think this is how I'm meant to use it." She handed both boarding passes to the agent. "Can you make the switch, please?" The agent processed the exchange, still looking bewildered. "I've been working this counter for 15 years, and I've seen people beg, argue, and even cry for upgrades. I've never seen someone voluntarily give up a first-class seat." As Sarah took the economy boarding pass, the man touched her arm lightly. "May I ask your name?" "Sarah Mitchell." "Thank you, Sarah Mitchell. I won't forget this." Sarah watched as he boarded ahead of her, disappearing into the jetway. When her economy group was finally called, she made her way to the rear of the aircraft, squeezing past other passengers to reach her middle seat between a large man already asleep against the window and a woman typing furiously on her laptop. The 14-hour flight was everything economy class usually was: cramped, noisy, with mediocre food served in plastic containers. Sarah tried to sleep, but managed only a few uncomfortable dozes. When she got up to stretch her legs, she walked through the first-class cabin and caught a glimpse of the man, now comfortably reclined in what would have been her seat, his cane secured beside him. Their eyes met briefly, and he nodded in acknowledgement. Sarah smiled and continued to the lavatory, telling herself that her discomfort was temporary, while his condition was not. Near the end of the flight, a flight attendant approached Sarah with an envelope. "The gentleman in 1D asked me to give you this." Inside was a handwritten note on airline stationery. "Some people talk about kindness, others live it. Thank you for seeing the person, not just the disability. Eric." The following week in Sydney was a whirlwind of wedding activities for Sarah's sister Marisa. Between rehearsal dinners, the ceremony, and reception, Sarah hardly had time to sightsee, though she did manage a quick harbor cruise and a visit to the opera house. She didn't mention the seat exchange to her family. It seemed unnecessary, and she didn't want any fuss about what she considered a simple act of decency. The return flight to the United States was in economy class as originally planned, and Sarah arrived home exhausted but happy for her sister's new chapter. She returned to work at Sunshine Travel, fielding questions about Sydney and showing the few photos she'd taken on her phone. Life resumed its normal rhythm. Sarah continued booking exotic vacations for clients, arranging special experiences she would likely never have herself, and finding joy in their excited feedback. 3 weeks passed, and the memory of the man with the cane, Eric, faded into the background of her busy life. Then came the morning that changed everything. The insistent blaring of Sarah's alarm clock at 5:30 a.m. was normal. The thunderous sound of helicopter rotors at 5:47 a.m. was not. Sarah threw back her curtains to witness an impossible sight: Marine One, the president's helicopter, descending onto the small field behind her row of townhouses. 2 smaller helicopters accompanied it, circling the area as the main aircraft touched down. Before Sarah could process what she was seeing, her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, unmistakably Secret Service agents. "Miss Sarah Mitchell?" the taller agent asked when she cautiously opened the door. Yes? Ma'am, we need you to prepare for a meeting. You have 45 minutes. Comfortable business casual attire is appropriate. The colonel is waiting. The colonel? I don't understand. What colonel? What is happening? Sarah asked, clutching her robe tighter around herself. Colonel Eric Matthews, Special Forces, the agent replied, his expression softening slightly. He said you would remember him. Sarah's mind raced back to the flight. The scarred face, the cane, the middle seat in economy. Eric. He's here? In the president's helicopter? Yes, ma'am. 45 minutes. After the quickest shower and preparation of her life, Sarah emerged from her townhouse in black slacks and a blue blouse, her hair still damp. The agents escorted her across the field to where Marine One sat, its rotors now still but ready. A small group of uniformed military personnel stood nearby, and among them was a familiar figure with a cane. As Sarah approached, the man turned to face her. He wore a decorated military dress uniform, the morning sun glinting off numerous medals on his chest. His scarred face broke into a smile of recognition. Sarah Mitchell, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet me on such short notice. Colonel Matthews, Sarah replied, still dazed by the surreal situation. I hardly had a choice with Marine One in my backyard and the Secret Service at my door. Eric laughed. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. I wanted to thank you properly, and in my current position, this is how I travel. Current position? I'm the President's Special Advisor on Veterans Affairs, he explained. 3 weeks ago, I was returning from a medical consultation in Los Angeles. I've had 17 surgeries in the past 2 years. Sarah listened as Eric explained how he had sustained his injuries. As a Special Forces team leader, he had led a high-risk extraction mission to rescue captured personnel. When their helicopter came under heavy fire during evacuation, Eric had placed himself between the incoming fire and his team, sustaining near-fatal injuries that ended his field career. The President awarded me the Medal of Honor last year, Eric continued, gesturing to the distinctive blue ribbon around his neck that Sarah hadn't initially recognized. During my acceptance speech, I mentioned that while my physical recovery has been difficult, the hardest part has been how people now treat me differently because of my appearance and limitations. He paused, looking directly at Sarah. Then I told the story of a travel agent who gave up her first-class seat to a stranger without hesitation or pity, who treated me with dignity when others couldn't look me in the eye. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. It was nothing special. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Eric said simply. And that's why I'm here. The First Lady was particularly moved by your story. She asked me to extend an invitation. Eric gestured toward Marine One. Would you join me for a short trip? Now? I have appointments today. Clients coming in to plan their vacations. Your manager Eleanor has already been contacted. Your schedule has been cleared for the week. Sarah stood speechless, looking between Eric, the Secret Service agents, and the iconic presidential helicopter. A week? If you accept, you'll understand shortly, Eric said with a smile. Do you trust me? Sarah thought for a moment about the extraordinary circumstances, then nodded. After all, I already gave you my seat once. Marine One transported them to Andrews Air Force Base, where a sleek Gulfstream C-37B, a military VIP transport jet, awaited on the tarmac. As they settled into the luxurious cabin, Sarah finally found her voice again. Colonel, I appreciate the gesture, but this seems excessive for a simple seat swap. Eric turned in his seat to face her. Sarah, in my line of work, I've seen the worst of humanity. I've witnessed hatred, violence, and indifference, but I've also seen how small acts of kindness can create ripples that change lives. He gestured around the cabin. This isn't excessive when you understand what your action represents. As the jet took off, Eric explained that the First Lady had been developing a recognition program for civilians who exemplify the values of compassion and service that military families understand deeply. You're our first recipient, he said. The First Lady wanted to give you something you've never had. The luxury travel experiences you've arranged for others all these years. 6 hours later, the jet touched down at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. Sarah was escorted to Hale Koa, an exclusive military resort on Waikiki Beach, where she was given a beachfront suite normally reserved for high-ranking officials. "The next 7 days are yours," Eric told her as staff brought her luggage to the room. "You'll have VIP access to military installations normally closed to civilians. Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona Memorial, even a submarine tour if you're interested." Sarah stood on the balcony overlooking the perfect crescent of Waikiki Beach, still processing the surreal turn of events. "All this because I gave up a seat?" Eric joined her at the railing, leaning slightly on his cane. "No, Sarah. All this because when faced with a choice between comfort and compassion, you chose compassion without hesitation. In a world where people increasingly choose themselves, that deserves recognition." The week that followed was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. She toured military facilities with Colonel Matthews as her guide, learning about Hawaii's strategic importance and the sacrifices of service members stationed there. She was treated to dining experiences at exclusive officers' clubs, received a private tour of a nuclear submarine, and even participated in a traditional Hawaiian blessing ceremony usually reserved for distinguished visitors. On her final evening in Hawaii, over dinner at a beachfront restaurant, Eric shared more of his story. After his injuries, he had contemplated suicide during the darkest days of his recovery. The physical pain was manageable with medication, but the way people reacted to his appearance, the averted gazes, the awkward interactions, the unconscious recoils, had nearly broken his spirit. "When strangers treat you like you're less than human, you start to believe it," he said quietly. "Your simple act of kindness on that flight reminded me that not everyone sees the scars first." He placed a small box on the table between them. "The First Lady wanted you to have this." Inside was a perfectly detailed model of Marine One, mounted on a wooden base with a small brass plaque engraved with Sarah's name and the date of their flight to Sydney. "There's more," Eric said. "I'm scheduled for my final reconstructive surgeries in Sydney next month. The medical team there specializes in facial trauma. The First Lady suggested you might like to accompany me as my guest. First class, of course." Sarah looked up from the model helicopter, stunned. "Australia again?" "Only if you're interested. No pressure." Eric smiled. "But I've found having someone you trust nearby makes medical procedures less daunting, and since you're the only person who's seen beyond these scars without flinching, I could use a friend there." 2 months later, Sarah returned to her desk at Sunshine Travel. The model of Marine One now occupied a prominent position near her computer, drawing curious questions from clients. When they asked about it, Sarah simply said it was a gift from a friend in government service. Her experiences in Hawaii and later in Sydney, accompanying Colonel Matthews through his final surgeries, had given her first-hand knowledge of luxury travel that no amount of research could provide. Her sales increased even further, as she could now personally recommend experiences she had enjoyed. But more importantly, Sarah had gained perspective. Each time she arranged a special vacation for wealthy clients, she remembered that the true luxury in life wasn't found in first-class cabins or five-star resorts. It was found in moments of genuine human connection. Colonel Matthews remained in contact, calling occasionally to check in and update her on his recovery. His facial reconstruction had been largely successful, though he would always bear some evidence of his injuries. "Battle scars are badges of honor," he had told her. "I'm just grateful mine no longer frighten children." 1 year after their unusual meeting, Sarah received a package at her office. Inside was a framed photograph of herself and Eric on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, taken during his recovery period. With it was a handwritten note. "Sarah, a year ago today, you taught a decorated soldier the true meaning of courage, not running into gunfire, but reaching out to help when everyone else turns away. The president still mentions your story in speeches about American character. Remember, the most powerful journeys aren't measured in miles traveled, but in lives touched. Yours changed mine. Colonel Eric Matthews, Special Forces. Sarah displayed the photograph beside the Marine One model, creating her own collection of travel memories at last. When clients commented on the unusual display, Sarah would smile and tell them, "These remind me that the most valuable upgrade isn't to first class, it's to first-class humanity." Later that week, as Sarah helped an elderly couple plan their dream African safari, the wife noticed the photograph and Marine One model. "Those look like they have quite a story behind them," she remarked. Sarah smiled. "They do. They remind me that sometimes the most meaningful journeys aren't the ones we take, but the ones we help others take." The greatest destination, after all, wasn't found on any map. It was the journey to becoming the person you were meant to be. Someone who, when given the choice between comfort and kindness, would choose kindness every time. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to In the Heartlight for more stories that warm the soul and remind us of the extraordinary impact of ordinary kindness. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next one.